Doug, thanks for coming out. Really appreciate you
Oh,
having
thanks for
you.
having me.
Um, I was just thinking this afternoon, my gosh, this will be already season 7 of Atlanta United. It's hard to believe that
Yeah.
7 years ago, Atlanta United were kicking off against the New York Red Bulls up at Bobby Dodd Stadium. I mean, what are your thoughts going into this season based on what you've seen and really what you've seen from preseason, what you've seen kind of from working your sources? I mean, your kind of impressions of things, how things are going.
Well, the biggest thing that we keep hearing about is culture. There a
Mhm.
cultural change, competing for the crest, fighting for the badge, battling for the badge. If you want to keep alliteration going, um, and it's an interesting thing because I've said this on my podcast, and y'all know this, but in my MBA education, the one thing that would constantly get hit on is keeping a positive culture, keeping a productive culture is the toughest thing to do in a business. And when you lose it, it is the most difficult challenge to overcome. Now, I don't know if that's true with Atlanta United. And it's interesting that that seems to be a theme of this preseason because that's what Joseph said after that loss to Austin. And some people killed him for it, and some people praised him for it. But he called out, I think, Carlos Bocanegra, Darren Eales, for buying players that were more business decisions, maybe, than were interested in playing for Atlanta United. That's not a reflection of the player. It's more a reflection of the player, the type of players that Atlanta United was acquiring, if that makes sense. If the difference is understood
Right.
there. So if you can get guys to believe in something and play together as a team and execute the tactics because they understand the culture and this is important, then it can be better than the sum of its parts. Right now, Atlanta United's parts are good. Are they better than a lot of other teams in the East? I would say no. So you overcome that with culture, and then there's still some players that are likely coming in. But that's the most important thing that I've noticed in the conversations we've had with the players so far.
Yeah, we were saying before the show, Brooks mentioned that the training ground, and I mean, you're there, myself and Tyler were there. But Brooks was saying, I guess the vibe in the locker room and the training ground's a lot different. And Tyler, you're talking about 92-9 when Pineda was talking to Dukes and Bell. Pineda was kind of saying the same thing. Um, so that kind of goes into what you're just talking about, Doug, like the culture and the vibe and all of that. So I mean, is it a case of, do you think in Joseph's case, maybe addition by subtraction, that maybe, you know, Joseph in a way was outgrowing the club and his departure was needed to really move the club forward in a way?
I think part of it, yeah, definitely. Um, Joseph is the face of the franchise
Mhm.
or was the face of the franchise. He'll hold all the records for a long, long time with the franchise. But in pro sports, after a while, dissolutions happen and players have to move on for whatever reason. And it happened with Joseph, and it'll happen again with Almada or whomever, Miles Robinson, whoever you want to throw out, Brooks Lennon, whoever you want to throw out there, Brad Guzan, for various reasons. And I mean, I can understand what I think is Joseph's side of it. He was tired of losing. He didn't like how the club was being built. He didn't like how the club played. But at the same time, you have a contract and you're tasked with giving your best. I don't know that I can say Joseph gave his best all the time last season, not compared to what we've seen in the past. I don't know, about his knee. I don't know what he's dealing with his wife being pregnant at the end of the season, or I'm sorry, his significant other being uh, pregnant at the end of the season. I don't know any of those things that could affect a player's mentality. All I know is that when you watched him on the field, it wasn't the same player, and sometimes it looked like a player who maybe wasn't giving his best. But he's only human, so I can understand that. Turn it around in
Right.
the club, I can see the club side of it too. Big salary, one of three you're allowed on the team, not getting the production you want, maybe not getting the leadership that you want, maybe not getting the camaraderie that you're looking for with the rest of the team and maybe other people. It's just it was I think a good decision for both parties, And now we'll see what happens if Joseph is able to produce in Miami.
I think for me, that was the biggest thing that at face value was noticed last season when we always go back to the chicken and rice thing, right? But that was the moment it kind of seemed like, dude, Joseph's got a point, but you got to go about things the right way. And like you just said, the contract, you still have a contract. You still have responsibilities. The fan base still adores you. But again, I do see the club side of it. And this is a big if, and I'm not speaking from any kind of, inside knowledge or anything, but if he or any particular player does become a quote unquote poison in the locker room and is bringing the rest of the team down, you have to do something about that. And sometimes it's painful, and it does suck if it was your star player, your face of the franchise. But after the comments today by Brooks and kind of seeing the players out there the past couple of training sessions, how do you feel? Because you get to go to a lot more than I do, but how do you feel the team looks in the sense of that culture and that camaraderie?
It's really hard to tell when they're at the training ground. It's much easier to tell when they are off-site, like in the past in Charleston or at IMG or the other places they've done preseason camps.
Yep.
That, and a lot of times they're doing the same drills that we see. Today was a full training. We got to see all of the training. But in the past, we see the warm-up drills and things like that. You can't really tell anything from those. So it's hard to tell right now. I will say that the players are more positive, probably because it's not last season anymore.
Yeah.
And last season was awful for everybody, except maybe the doctors if they get paid by the hour. I don't know. There's only one minor injury. It looks like Derek Etienne must have suffered something last season, or maybe had something done in the offseason, because he's still not training with the team. He's training by himself, but he is training, which is a good sign. We also haven't seen Ozzie Alonso return to the field yet. He's coming off an ACL. We know from Emerson Hyman's timeline, and we know from what Carlos said, I think in November, they're expecting Alonso back near the end of training camp, I think. If my old man memory serves me right. So just not having injured players is a huge positive and got to be a confidence boost for this team. And now we'll see what happens on Saturday at Chattanooga if they can come out of that without injuries. And that's always, the number one goal of every friendly.
And to add on to that too, not that I think it's anything to panic about, and I almost don't want to say it, but Santiago Sosa had a wrist brace or something.
Yeah, I'm not
wrong.
Yeah.
And again, it's soccer. You do have to push off of people and all that, but it didn't seem to be bothering him. But it's worth noting, but he's also going to be suspended for the first 2 games, I believe, of the season. Still plenty of time.
Is it 2 or is it 4? I can't remember anymore.
I can't remember.
I need to go back and look it up.
3, and one game he missed the last game of the season, so he's got 2 more.
Okay,
there you go.
So I have no idea who's going to play that position. I guess maybe Ibarra.
Yeah.
But there's still some question marks at some of the positions, I think. So we'll start to find out some stuff on a beautiful day in Chattanooga on Saturday.
What have been your first impressions of Garth Lagerwey?
He's deliberate. He has a process that has been proven to work at Salt Lake and at Seattle, consistently proven, not a one-season wonder type of a thing. Mm-hmm. And so he's following that process with Atlanta United. And this first season, I think there's enough talent on this team to do some good things. I don't know if there's enough to challenge for trophies yet, but again, there's still time. And so if people are expecting, or we're expecting, 3 to 5 players coming in the first week of training camp, that's not Lagerwey's style. It's going to be deliberate. It's going to think through the monies, think through the contracts, think through the culture, think through all of that. Not to say that wasn't happening under Darren with Carlos, But with Garth, I think it's going to be a little more just process driven than in the past. I met with him last week for about an hour. Half of it was just kind of off the record, him and I talking about personal lives and things like that. But that was the biggest takeaway I got from him. And it may be why you still haven't seen a striker coming in to replace Joseph. Typically, you don't get rid of somebody unless you know who the next person is. And we're still waiting. Pineda said last Tuesday we expect 3 players in. What's today, Wednesday?
Almost 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see any players coming in by the end of the week. I don't think it's going to happen.
I think what we saw
I've
today,
been wrong many times.
I think what we saw today will be the Chattanooga squad, most of it anyway.
Yeah, and then they head to Mexico.
Big group of twos.
And we'll find out from Pineda on Friday what the squads are going to be, but I assume it's going to be – in the past, it's been like they do starters for 30 minutes and then 45 minutes and then 60 minutes and then 90 minutes, I think.
Yep.
So I assume it's going to be something similar like that on Saturday.
Well, that was a great interview you did with Garth.
Thanks.
And it broke the internet there for a little bit because there was the talks of the DP and TAM deal and do we have a DP slot? Do we not? And it continued all the way up until today, too. He did an interview with Dukes and Bell, and they pressured him on it as well. And doesn't seem, like they're going to be able to bring in a DP. But the loan process, crazy MLS rules, they might be able to bring in someone with a high price tag. But it's been definitely something that the fan base has been talking about is what availability that do we have for the rest of the offseason to bring someone in. And the other comment he made is there were still a few more people to exit the squad. So that was an interesting line that he said today.
Yeah, well, there's almost certainly going to be at least one player leaving, Eric Lopez, who's still not with the team. That's the common sense subtraction.
Yeah.
Now, whether there's more, I guess that depends on if players are, who we didn't see at training today, actually, now that I think about it? Machop Chol.
Yeah, I saw him on a
I saw
car
him on the side.
hang out on the side.
Okay. Well, that he could be a player going out the door, maybe. Now that I think about it. The TAM DP, the team does have a DP slot open right now.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph is gone. There is a DP slot open. It's how they want to fill that DP slot is the important decision Garth has to make. And the other thing, and I tweeted this out today, and it may have been snarky, and I didn't mean it to. The DP slot is just a salary construct. That's all it is. It's a silly salary construct for a league that has a $2.5 billion streaming rights deal now. And I think once you start to see proof of concept with this with Apple, then you'll start to see some of these roster rules and mechanisms get what's the word I'm looking for? Streamlined, maybe a little bit. Not go away, but made easier to understand.
That's something that we've kind of talked about doing our post-match shows on Twitter, but I wonder if you've got the Leagues Cup coming up this season for the first time.
The full Leagues Cup, yeah.
Yeah. If MLS goes in there and gets trounced by a bunch of Liga MX teams, I don't see Garber just looking at that and being like, "Oh, well, we'll try again next year."
There's a contract. There's a contract in place. It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm not talking about the cup. I'm talking about the same MLS rules that apply to teams.
Oh, gotcha.
I think from that point, maybe you do see something like a fourth DP slot or something more, liberal in terms of allowing a little bit more freedom for these clubs to spend money.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wrote, or maybe I've said, some sort of version of the NBA's luxury tax, I think would work for the teams that want to spend. And then some of that money can trickle down and help some of the teams that simply can't spend have a little more revenue. But most of these teams are owned by billionaires. The money is there.
Yep.
Right.
It's just a matter of if you want to spend it.
Just like
I mean, I was gonna say you look at New England Revolution owned by Robert Kraft, and you talk about they're still playing in Gillette Stadium, why haven't they built a stadium of their own? All of that, but yeah, we know Robert Kraft isn't hurting for money.
The one that continues to boggle my mind in the opposite direction is Toronto, which I know is a major market, but they don't play in an NFL stadium. Yet
Right.
they spend money like it's going out of style
Yeah.
on
Right.
players. And that continues to fascinate me and makes me wonder why more teams don't do that.
Yeah, that was interesting. Interesting. One comment that did come in the chat about MLS rules and Mark ATLUTD 711 saying, talk about the allocation list going out the window, as you learned a few days back. But I kind of staring it back to Atlanta United and Yakumakis, rumored to be coming to Atlanta, whether it's on a loan deal, loan to buy, a DP, we're not sure. But from what you've heard and what you've seen, what are your impressions of Yakumakis and what impact could he have on Atlanta United if indeed, these reports, do come to pass, which it looks like they very well may.
It's a complicated deal. I know that. I think it would be for a loan to turn into a DP. Joseph came on a loan as a DP, which so that's a little bit different in that regard. I've only been able to watch YouTube highlights. I don't get to watch a lot of Scottish Premier League. Looking at his stats, if people expect that he's going to come in and set MLS on fire, I would caution not to be all that hopeful. You look at his stats on like FB Ref, and I'm looking at him right now. He had the fantastic year in 2020, 2021 in Holland, in which he had 26 goals in 30 matches.
Yep.
That's a cool total. 8 of those goals were penalty kick goals. So now you're down to 18 goals. Then you do your non-penalty expected goals. It should have been 13. So his best season would be 13 goals in 10 years. Now, flipping that around, his goals per minute, though, he averages 1 goal per 157 minutes. Joseph averaged 1 goal per 141 minutes in his career. I didn't do his MLS career. I did his whole career. So there is some hope there. But what I think that the team wants is they want this player to score goals, but they also want him to be able to combine and make Almada and Araujo and Etienne better and more statistically impactful than they were last year with the myriad strikers they had to play with because of injuries and everything else.
I think it's
so. I don't know. You look at his assists; he's never had more than 2 assists in a year. So, is he that type of player? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you look at his highlight reel, and any highlight reel is going to look great, right? It's a highlight reel. That's the whole point. I think if anybody wants to hold on to anything in terms of that year that he was in the Eredivisie, that side was getting relegated, and he still did that. So take that for what it's worth. You've got a guy he's still, no matter how tanked the team was at that point, he was still going out doing his job, which is a big deal, I think, especially considering what we were just talking about with Joseph.
Yep.
Now, granted, you've got completely different styles of football that are being played in 2 different countries. But I do agree. I think the biggest thing is going to be put some of the goal scoring onus back on Araujo. Etienne, I think, is going to be a big one. Almada, obviously, we already know he can make something out of nothing, and some other guys. But I think having maybe that quote unquote more complete striker, at least in the terms of what we're hoping for and what it seems like he may be, he's strong, big bodied kind of guy. Maybe that will open up things a little bit for the way that Pineda wants to play.
And just be healthy. I mean, I don't know what his injury history is, if he has one, but they need someone who can work consistently with the trio we've already talked about and develop some chemistry. And, one of my favorite phrases that I use on the podcast, I used it a lot last year, is chemistry or consistency breeds chemistry. Chemistry breeds confidence. Confidence breeds results. And Atlanta United just could not get that last year because there was no consistency because of all the injuries. And so that would be another like box that would need to be checked if I were Atlanta United and I'm pursuing a striker.
Yeah. Though we probably going to cut you loose here in a couple of minutes, but before I do, I want to ask you. You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Lagerway, during the Men Believers This Life show a few weeks back, 3 minutes back, said that he expected Atlanta to be or to have a home playoff match in 2023. And again, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but taking into account the different competitions, obviously MLS, U.S. Open Cup, Leagues Cup, putting those together, I guess, what is your reasonable expectations for Atlanta United in 2023?
Making the playoffs is as a lower seed, I think is a reasonable expectation. Now that could change, obviously, if they, depending upon who they bring in. If they're able to bring in another striker, a center midfielder, and a center back for depth, then you start to be able to compete a little bit more in all of these contests. But to me, you've got to put the impetus on just making the MLS playoffs, because you haven't done it in 2 of the past 3 years. Haven't won a playoff game since 2019, which is hard to think about, I think, for some supporters, but it's the truth. That's got to be the impetus, and they got put in a tough group in the Leagues Cup. We still don't know about the U.S. Open Cup. What's going to happen with that? And all that is assuming that everybody stays healthy too, which is unrealistic.
Yeah. And, that brings to the conversation, not just about financial, but the fixture congestion. How does Pineda handle, Open Cup, Leagues Cup, and then the regular season? So that really works into the conversation too, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And, the team has a boatload of homegrowns. I don't know what the rules are going to be for the Leagues Cup or even the U.S. Open Cup about the use of homegrowns, but some of these guys, they need minutes. Jackson Conway, who I just wrote about tonight, you could see the story on my Twitter feed at Doug Roberson AJC.
Cut his hair, by the way.
Yeah, well, he did it because he is focused on winning a job with the first team. He went nowhere. He went nowhere during the offseason. He spent no vacations, no nothing. He went back and forth to the fitness center at the team's training facility and watched film and worked out.
And he's jacked.
That's all he did, because he wants to play and he's got an opportunity. This is the second consecutive season he's come into the early part of training camp as the only healthy striker. You got Tyler Wolff, who played a lot at the beginning of last year and then just disappeared. Machop Chol, who was kind of coming in late in games, just some of the homegrowns. Noah Cobb, who I know Carlos Bocanegra thinks has, I think he said it's U.S. men's national team potential back in November. I'm forgetting if the ones I'm forgetting. I'm for my apologies. Johnny Fortune, Efrain Morales. I think both of them will probably be with the twos. Yeah, I think they'll probably be with the twos just to get playing time.
Yeah,
things like that. But they got these homegrowns, and the reason they need minutes. So with all these fixtures, hopefully you see some of these guys not just get like 10 minutes at the end, but get a start. Surround them with some veterans, let them start, and see what happens.
Yeah, one other person that we didn't mention, Vial, from Atlanta United too. So that's another young player that we need to take into account. But
and McFadden, who's not a homegrown, but
drafted,
had one bad game, I think, last season in his run when he was forced into starts. But the rest of the time played decently.
Looked pretty well, I think.
Yeah, no, indeed. Well, Doug, definitely.
I was just going to say, one of the interesting things on that Garth said as well at the beginning, and Doug, I don't know if you can answer this, but you could blink a few times for yes or no. Garth made a comment about how it was a reset moment for the salary cap, and he said that a lot of the long-term moves didn't meet his philosophy going forward. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but by the end of the season, do you expect Carlos to still be with the team?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
This is a narrative that I understand from some of the supporters, but at the same time drives me crazy. if you're going to blame Carlos for some of the contracts given to Heineman and Huzetu, who's another favorite to bang on, and Sosa and some of those guys, then you also have to give him credit for some of the better ones. And he doesn't get that credit. You have to give him credit for going out and getting a guy freaking played in the Champions League, Luis Araujo, to come to Atlanta United. Is it Bocanegra's fault that it hasn't worked out yet? No, but it still could. Do I agree with every decision he's made? No, not at all. Do I understand most of the decisions? To some degree, I do. Now, if the team doesn't make the playoffs this season, I think that there will be a hard discussion about Bocanegra's future. If it does make the playoffs, then I think, he and Garth will have a conversation about, what did you learn? Can you apply the principles that I've tried to follow in my career to what you're doing going forward? And if the answer is yes, then we'll see what happens.
And it's worth remembering too, like he actually has a contract as well.
Yeah. He's got, I think 2 more years or something.
He's got a couple more years. And so I think that's what people tend to forget as well. Like yes, it can be as simple as, well, just, fire somebody, but there's still contracts. There's still things in place that may throw a wrench in just the simple, like, all right, well, we're going to burn it down and start over with somebody else.
Part of the narrative, the team has won 3 trophies. It won the MLS Cup under Tata. It won
4 AmFam Cup. Get it?
The U.S. Open Cup and the Campeones Cup, and came within a Joseph Martinez missed penalty of hosting the MLS Cup for the second consecutive year. Yep. Now, if you want to say Tata deserves all the credit for some of that, that's fine. But Tata was not here in 2019. Carlos was. That was a roster he put together. He deserves just a little bit of credit for that. Again, I don't agree with every decision he's made. Jurgen Damm, I understand why it was done, not for the money.
Yeah.
That was a silly amount of money to spend on that
Tommy's
player.
favorite one to throw out in every show.
It was a silly amount of money, but I understand why they signed him.
His TikToks, right? His TikTok videos.
They were pushing for a playoff berth.
Right.
And they thought with his speed and Liga MX's experience, he could be a difference maker. They had no way of knowing that when he got the ball, his brain and his feet were going to be two different things most of the time.
It was a legitimate, there was potential. But
you look at it on paper, you think, okay, just playing time. With playing time, it'll happen. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Andrew Gutman was another good example for Carlos that you got to give him. I mean, that was the long-term thinking. Get him, loan him out to the Red Bulls while you get Bello ready to be sold. And then he's just ready to come in and one of the best players last year. So, I mean,
Brooks Lennon, I think, is a bargain for his salary. And people want to say he's not Julian Gressel. Well, Joseph Martinez that Brooks got to play with isn't the Joseph Martinez that Gressel got to play with.
Right.
Brooks doesn't have Miguel Almiron, Tito Villalba playing in front of him either, which Gressel did. Gressel is a fantastic player. But to say Lennon isn't Gressel isn't fair to either player.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
One more question, Doug. I know the timing was a little off, but do you think that if Garth would have been brought in 2 weeks before, do you think they would have retained Rossetto?
No,
I don't want to make sure that we're on the same page there.
It doesn't fall in line with the other moves they made.
Yeah. Seems very much the opposite.
Rossetto is a nice guy, and I think he's a good player. And I'm always very what's the word I'm looking for? I don't really rate defensive midfielders as highly as other people do. Rob Uzri and I once got into a long argument on Twitter because I think he said at the time, that's the number one position I would fill or something like that in the spine of a team. And I was like, I totally disagree. So, what Rossetto does well, I may just not notice like I should. All I know is the guy has 1 assist in 3 seasons, and it bounced off his shin into the path of a teammate to score. And in a league in which the hockey assist is the norm, to only have 1 assist means to me you're not really advancing the ball forward like your manager. And I know Pineda has said he wants him to. to do. Now, can he do it this season? Sure. He's a professional footballer. He's skilled, more skilled than I'll ever be. But he just got to do it. You know? Just got to do it.
Well, and that's the biggest thing, because people will tend to throw out his passing accuracy, which is it's great. It's up there with Ozzie Alonso. It's in the top 10. Now, I haven't checked for last season, but going into 2022, he had one of the top 10 pass accuracies, and that's great. But the ball has to be moved forward, and I think that's one of the biggest gripes of Rossetto, haters, I guess, is that he doesn't move the ball progressively forward. He tends to side, backwards, whatever, and that's
he's not about putting it into spaces. He's about putting it to the player.
Right.
I want to see more put it into spaces.
Right.
Even if it's not complete, at least make that back line or that mid to low block, make them think about it. That, this might be coming.
100%. I totally agree with that.
But we'll see. We'll see. Again, super nice guy, and I think he can prove his salary. But he's just got to do it.
He scored against Birmingham, so he's always going to have
that. Drove me up a freaking wall. That was the worst thing to happen to him. Because
the hype train was through the roof.
People forget that that was Birmingham's first week of training camp.
Yep.
They're already playing their C team in that game. I mean, it was kids. Yeah. I don't think that some of the kids had jersey numbers. And I'm not making that up. And he scores, and everyone goes banana. Oh, he's the future of the franchise. I'm like, context, man. Context. Look at who this is against. Worst thing to happen to him was those 2 goals.
Yeah.
Before you go, Doug, I know you and Tyler had a bet last year with Mascara scoring a goal.
I won.
Now, I was
you
won because Pro screwed me.
I was at that game. I was there.
If I go and look at the stats, I think I see a 0 under G.
I got your Arby's gift card.
I saw that goal. It was onside, 100%.
Yeah.
So I think you need to give Tyler a second chance on this and figure something out.
No, I think Mascara will score this year. I mean, he showed he's very, very fast.
Yeah.
He just got the Jurgen Damm issue, the inexperienced player issue at times of just trying to do too much too quickly instead of just kind of breathing a little bit. Talked to Conway about that today because he had some scoring opportunities in the few minutes that he got last year, but as soon as the ball would come to him, it was almost like, oh, my score. And then just go too fast and it all gets messed up. But he's got, 85 games as a pro. He's only 21. So I think the game might slow down for him a little bit this year if he gets opportunities. And we might see the same for Mascara too.